Dorothy Langston woke up toothless the morning of her granddaughter's wedding. Melinda, her own daughter, called it funnier that way. Callie laughed, too, then looked away. By fall, their house would be listed for foreclosure, and Dorothy Langston would be the one circling the auction date. They took her dignity for sport. She returned the favor, in court, in ink, and without flinching. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Dorothy Langston woke to the scent of roses and the sound of cicadas drilling through the savannah heat. It was Callie's wedding day, the day her only granddaughter would walk into a new life. And the first thought in Dorothy's mind, even before her bones ached or her knees barked, was her teeth. Her hand reached instinctively toward the porcelain dish on the nightstand. Empty. She sat up, blinking through the morning haze, checked the drawer, the bathroom counter, even the travel case in her overnight bag. Nothing. Her chest didn't tighten, not right away. Instead, she moved with the slow steadiness of someone who'd lived through enough to recognize insult dressed as accident. Downstairs, the Langston family's Victorian home buzzed with the usual pre-wedding chaos: curling irons, half-eaten toast, laughter in rooms where Dorothy had once been the loudest voice. She stepped onto the landing in her robe, gripping the banister like a cane. Melinda was in the kitchen, in silk pajamas and a mimosa, not a hair out of place. "You seen my denture case?" Dorothy asked calmly. Melinda turned, eyes flicking once over Dorothy's bare gums, then away. "Maybe you misplaced it, Dot." Dorothy tilted her head. "It was beside my Bible last night." Melinda smiled tightly. "Maybe God took it." Dorothy didn't move. "That's not funny." Melinda took a long sip, smirk curling. "It is, actually. It's hilarious. Wait until they pan across the front row today. Makes the whole thing feel authentic." Dorothy said nothing, just looked at her. Long enough that Melinda's smirk faltered before she turned back to her drink. Callie passed through the kitchen then, satin robe cinched tight, eyes wide and carefully unfocused. She paused when she saw her grandmother. Dorothy looked at her, hoping for even the ghost of acknowledgement, but Callie glanced away. "I'm late for hair," and vanished down the hall. Dorothy stood there another 10 seconds, then turned and walked back upstairs. She dressed with precision, navy blue skirt suit, modest pearls, no fuss. She combed her hair back neatly, applied her lipstick without shaking, and when it came time to leave, she folded a lace handkerchief into her clutch and smiled in the mirror, wide, empty, unflinching. The church was full, packed rows, flashing cameras, laughter layered over hush. Dorothy sat in the second pew, straight-backed and regal despite the gap behind her lips. People noticed. Of course they did. But no one said a word. Not to her. When the music began and Callie appeared at the top of the aisle, Dorothy felt something unspool quietly inside her, like a ribbon letting go. Her granddaughter looked radiant, nervous, and completely unreachable. Melinda sat beside her, posture perfect. At one point, the camera panned across them. The live stream crew had set up 3 angles. Dorothy knew the internet would remember today better than they would. She kept her eyes forward, hands folded, no reaction. The reception was louder, cheaper somehow. Plastic chandeliers, too much blush wine, shrieking laughter from the bridal party corner. Dorothy sat mostly alone. Occasionally someone would wave or say, "Bless your heart," but it never reached their eyes. Evie found her by the restroom line, maneuvering her scooter like a battleship through a sea of stilettos. "I thought I'd check the guest bathroom," she said. I didn't trust that Harpy's giggle when she walked past with a makeup bag. Dorothy blinked. "You found them?" Evie reached into her purse and handed over a velvet case. Inside, clean, intact, untouched, sat Dorothy's full denture plate. "Behind the mirror," Evie said, "wrapped in tissue, like a dirty secret." Dorothy pressed her lips together. "It was never about teeth," Evie grunted. "It never is." Dorothy turned toward the dance floor. The DJ was queuing up a mashup of 80s hits. Melinda laughed as she fake twirled with a groomsman. "Did you record the audio from the ceremony?" Evie asked. "I made a copy of the live stream," Dorothy said, slipping the velvet case into her purse without looking. "Video, sound, all of it." Evie nodded slowly. You're going to bury her. Dorothy tilted her head slightly. I'm just reclaiming my place at the table. Her eyes scanned the crowd, her family, her history, her witness list, and somewhere in the distance, thunder began to roll. The gift opening brunch was held in Melinda's freshly redecorated parlor. White lacquered floors, blush-toned walls, and a rental flower arch that clashed with the outdated crown molding. A mimosa bar stood in one corner, already ransacked. Dorothy sat in an antique wingback chair near the fireplace, porcelain cup in hand, unsipped. Her posture was perfect, her presence silent. She looked like a woman cast in stone, polished, rooted, quietly watching. Callie and Melinda took turns opening packages at the center of the room. The pile was curated to impress: sleek boxes from department stores, registry-approved luxury items, engraved flatware. When Callie opened a handmade quilt, vibrant blues, uneven stitches, the initials AW sewn discreetly in one corner, Melinda held it up by 2 fingers, like it might stain her manicure. Oh, bless her, she said with a brittle chuckle. Still thinks scrap fabric counts as a gift. Maybe it can go in the guest dog crate. A few women tittered nervously. Callie looked down, cheeks coloring, but said nothing. Dorothy didn't blink. She waited until Callie had moved on to the next gift, before standing and walking slowly toward her granddaughter. Her heels clicked once, twice, sharp punctuation in the hush. Callie looked up. Dorothy held out a plain white envelope. What's this? Callie asked softly. Something your father left for you, Dorothy said, just loud enough for the others to hear. Callie took it with both hands. Melinda glanced up. What now, Dot? A coupon for hugs. Dorothy ignored her. She turned and walked back to her chair without another word. She didn't need to say anything, not when the Langston crest was embossed on the envelope's seal, and the word notarized was stamped along its corner. Callie stared at it as if it weighed more than the crystal cake stand she'd unwrapped earlier. Later that afternoon, Dorothy met Roy at the bank. The lobby was cool and too quiet, the kind of sterile silence that belonged to air-conditioned vaults and whispered betrayal. Roy wore khakis and a linen shirt rolled to the elbows. He carried a folder thick with tabs and photocopies. The banker took them to a private room. When Dorothy opened the authorization packet, her hands didn't tremble. Wayne's trust was never revoked, Roy explained. Melinda never had access to the core assets. She just used the noise to pretend she did. Dorothy nodded once. Let's transfer what's mine and secure what's Callie's. Roy smiled faintly, already in motion. As they stood to leave, Dorothy turned back to the vault. Put the originals in cold storage. I don't want them breathing her air again. That evening, back at Melinda's house, the sunroom buzzed with praise. Imported tile, Melinda chirped. Custom blinds, paid for in full. Thank God. Wayne left us a generous cushion. Dorothy sat near the French doors, listening as Melinda sipped her 4th mimosa and held court. Across the room, Callie was still holding the envelope, now unopened, but clutched with intent. Her eyes flicked often to Dorothy, then away, like she wasn't quite ready to open either of the letters written for her that day. One by her grandmother, one from her father. Melinda poured herself another drink and continued. Of course, I had to chase down the contractor, but that's what money's for, right? Buying time, buying silence, buying people. The guests laughed politely. Dorothy didn't. Evie wheeled up beside her, holding a deviled egg and a look like she was itching for combat. Tell me you didn't sign anything, Evie whispered. Dorothy's eyes stayed fixed on Melinda. Not a line, she said. But she did. Evie raised a brow. You have it? Dorothy sipped her tea. I have everything. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. The air outside had thickened, but inside, the parlor remained pristine, oblivious, until Callie quietly stood, still clutching the envelope, and walked out the front door without a word. No one followed. Dorothy watched her go, eyes unreadable. She'd opened the door. Now it was Callie's turn to step through. The photographer was sweating through his linen vest before he even raised the camera. Let's get the whole family together, he called, waving people like cattle toward the front porch of Melinda's house. Dorothy didn't move at first. She sat beneath the camellia bush in a wrought iron chair, her parasol open against the Savannah sun, a handkerchief pressed lightly to her collarbone. Her heels rested precisely together, polished and silent. "Miss Langston," the photographer prompted. "You're the matriarch, right? We need you front and center." Melinda turned sharply from where she was adjusting Callie's veil. "Oh, let her sit if she wants. We can always crop later." The laughter that followed was half-hearted and jagged. Dorothy folded her parasol slowly. "I'll stand," she said. Callie stepped forward before anyone else could react. "I'll help her." They moved together, Callie's hand gentle under Dorothy's elbow. Dorothy's steps sure but deliberate. She didn't speak. Neither did Callie. The photographer arranged them awkwardly. Callie and her husband to be in the center, Melinda at Callie's right. Dorothy was placed to the far left, barely within frame. Just as the shutter clicked, Melinda leaned over and said under her breath, "Maybe Photoshop can brighten the wrinkles." Dorothy smiled directly at the lens. Full teeth, unbothered. Later that afternoon, Callie offered to help her down the porch steps. "I'll manage," Dorothy said, but didn't resist the arm offered. Together they descended slowly, each step deliberate. At the base of the stairs, Callie paused. "I haven't opened it yet," she said quietly. "I will," Dorothy nodded. "Take your time, truth doesn't expire." That evening, Dorothy returned to her own home, the small yellow clapboard bungalow she'd kept immaculate since Wayne passed. She changed into her cotton slippers and went to the hutch in the dining room, ready to pull out her china for cleaning. It was the first thing she did after big events, clean something that had stayed hers. The doors opened easily. The shelves were empty, no plates, no teacups, no gravy boat with the tiny chip on the handle from her 30th anniversary, only a folded piece of notebook paper. "Thought they'd get more use in a new home," it read. Tilda M. Dorothy didn't move. Her breath stayed even. Her hands didn't shake. She walked to the kitchen, opened her laptop, and typed Langston Wedgwood into Facebook Marketplace. There they were, 8 listings, each staged carelessly on what used to be her dining table. Price, negotiable, heirloom, no returns. She picked up the phone. Roy answered on the second ring. That didn't take long. "She's already sold the china." A pause. "I'll pull the title records tomorrow. My gut says if she's careless enough to list your dishes, she's arrogant enough to leave digital fingerprints." Dorothy clicked through the photos slowly. "Start with the house deed, then the credit lines." "I'll check probate too," Roy said. "If she's tried to amend anything tied to Wayne's will, we'll know." Dorothy shut the laptop. "This ends politely, or it ends permanently. I don't care which." The next morning, Melinda posted a photo. Callie, the groom, and Dorothy, faded in the far corner of the frame. Her caption read, "Grateful for the support of family. Love and legacy from every generation." Dorothy stared at it from her breakfast nook, tea going cold. She looked at the photo until her own figure blurred into background noise. She didn't comment. She just screenshotted the post, printed it on thick paper, and slid it into a manila folder labeled Exhibits. Behavior pattern. Across town, Roy walked out of the county clerk's office with a USB drive and a furrowed brow. When he called Dorothy, his voice was low and clipped. "You're not going to like this. Start talking." She filed for durable power of attorney. 6 years ago, notarized, signed, but I've got reason to believe the signature might have been traced. There's a title transfer request, pending review on your house. Dorothy didn't flinch. "Can we stop it? We already are." She exhaled, slow and clean. "Roy, pull everything." "Already started." Dorothy ended the call and turned back to her window. In the yard, a squirrel had knocked over her bird feeder again. She made no move to fix it. Instead, she opened a drawer beneath the hutch and pulled out a small lockbox. Inside, Wayne's funeral program, a copy of his will, and one photo of him standing beside Callie, age 6, holding a teacup from that very china set. She placed the photo on the windowsill. They'd forgotten she remembered everything, but she hadn't forgotten a thing. The woman behind the precinct desk didn't flinch when Dorothy Langston stated the purpose of her visit. "I'd like to report a theft," she said, setting her handbag on the counter, calm as clockwork. The officer blinked. A theft. My dentures, Dorothy replied. They were hidden deliberately. I have a witness and a potential suspect. He hesitated, then handed her a clipboard. You'll want to fill out an incident form, ma'am. Dorothy took it, retrieved a black ink pen from her purse, and began writing. Her handwriting was as clean as her tone, measured, cursive, irrefutable. By noon, the report had made its way into the system. By 3 p.m., Melinda had made her response known on Facebook. If my Mel lost her teeth at the wedding, that's a her problem. Senior moments are real, y'all, #blesser #granny gripes. It racked up 78 likes, mostly from acquaintances who couldn't place Dorothy's name but had always admired Melinda's blowouts and brunch posts. Someone added a gif of a chattering wind-up denture set. Dorothy read the post once, then again. She printed it. 3 copies. Roy met her that evening in his home office, which smelled like printer ink and old case files. He glanced over the incident report, Melinda's social post, and Dorothy's handwritten timeline. Any chance we could prove she tampered with the dentures as a form of coercion or humiliation? He asked. If you asked nicely, Dorothy said. Evie has a time-stamped photo of the bathroom cabinet mirror. The glass had been disturbed. No one went near it but Melinda. Roy raised an eyebrow. She tampered with the scene. That plays well in probate court. Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. This is the live stream from the wedding, audio included. You'll want to jump to the 15-minute mark. He slipped it into his laptop. That's when she said it was hilarious, right? Dorothy nodded. Her exact words were, wait until they pan across the front row. Makes the whole thing feel authentic. Roy smirked. I'm not sure what's worse, being cruel or being that confident no one would challenge her. She's never had to face silence with consequence. Roy's eyes narrowed. She's about to. That weekend, Evie pulled up beside Dorothy's curb in her scooter, holding a tiny velvet box and a brass key. What's this? Dorothy asked, stepping out onto the porch. Evie held up the key. Safety deposit box, box #238, Cornerstone Bank on Habersham. Dorothy raised an eyebrow. What's inside? Evie handed her the velvet box. Inside was a single antique brooch, ruby center, worn gold edges. My mama smuggled that out of Atlanta during a house fire, Evie said. I'm not much for sentiment, but I do believe in insurance. The rest is between you and whatever you're planning. Dorothy closed the box, her expression unreadable. Label it just in case, Evie added, wheeling backward down the walk. I already did. That night, Dorothy sat at her writing desk with a lap blanket pulled over her knees. The light was dim. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of her ceiling fan and the chirp of a summer frog outside the screen door. She clicked her phone camera on and steadied it on a tripod. State your name for the record, Roy's voice said from behind the camera. Dorothy Mae Langston, she replied. Clear and calm. Age 76. I am of sound mind and body. She leaned slightly forward. This testimony is to verify knowledge of a forged signature on a home equity loan filed in my name. I did not authorize it. The suspected forger is Melinda Renee Langston, my daughter-in-law. I have never given her power of attorney, despite what may appear in prior filings. She paused, breath steady. There has also been a pattern of targeted abuse, financial and emotional. This includes the hiding of essential medical devices, unauthorized sale of property, and verbal humiliation recorded at a public event. Roy nodded behind the lens. We'll have it sealed with a digital timestamp. Let's do 2 takes. Dorothy looked straight into the camera. I only need one. Just before midnight, her phone buzzed. A message from Callie. Just 1 line. I'm sorry. I didn't know she took them. Dorothy stared at it for a long time. Then she typed, you do now. She didn't press send. Not yet. Instead, she saved it to draft. Callie would see her answer in court. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old books, like memory trapped in wood. Dorothy Langston sat 2 rows from the bench, her skirt pressed smooth, her jaw set like granite. Her palms rested lightly on her lap, her face unreadable. Melinda walked in late, sunglasses on indoors, her heels too loud against the tile. She offered a brittle smile to the judge, too wide, too polished. Callie followed behind her, not sitting on either side. Judge Overton adjusted his glasses and glanced toward the petitioner's table. Mr. Chadwick, you indicated you had new material to enter into evidence? Roy stood. His navy blazer was sharp but worn at the elbows, and the flash drive in his hand looked impossibly small for the weight it carried. Yes, Your Honor. Video footage recovered from the deceased's personal laptop. It was password protected. We've since verified the timestamp, metadata, and handwriting match on the accompanying letter of intent. Melinda stiffened. Roy walked calmly to the clerk and handed over the drive. You'll find 2 items. One is a clip from the memorial service for Wayne Langston. The second is a video file saved on the laptop, marked for Callie and Mom. Dorothy didn't blink. The judge waved for the projection screen to drop. The courtroom dimmed. The first clip played a cell phone video from the funeral, shaky but audible. Melinda stood at the head of the reception table, champagne flute in hand. Well, I guess all that's left is sorting the paperwork, she said, laughing lightly. Dot should downsize anyway. One of those historic Savannah listings just sold for $500,000. She's sitting on a gold mine and a bunch of chipped teacups. A gasp fluttered from the back of the gallery. Cut it off, Melinda barked. That's out of context. The judge raised a hand without looking at her. Continue. The second file loaded. Wayne appeared on screen, pale, thinner than anyone remembered, wearing a threadbare flannel, and sitting in what looked like Dorothy's sunroom. His voice was weak, but deliberate. If you're seeing this, it's because the paper trail didn't hold. I didn't trust the lawyer Melinda brought in last year. I made a new will, video notarized. This version holds my wishes. He looked up directly. Melinda is not to inherit any part of my estate. I don't trust her. She's manipulated finances and isolated my mother from her own home. Everything I have, my trust, my accounts, the house goes to Dorothy and Callie. No one else. Melinda rose halfway out of her chair. Your Honor, I object. This is not a formal legal. It's admissible under Georgia State Probate Code. The judge cut in, especially when paired with authentication, which Mr. Chadwick has provided. She sank back into her seat. Her face drained of color. The lights came back up. Callie stood, her voice quiet but sure. I'd like to speak. The judge nodded. You're not under subpoena, Miss Langston. Are you testifying voluntarily? Yes, sir. Roy moved aside, and Callie walked to the witness stand. Her hands shook only once when she took the oath. I used to think silence made me neutral, she said, but I see now it made me complicit. She looked directly at her grandmother. Melinda isolated Dot. She used her for housing, sold her things behind her back, and humiliated her at my wedding. Then she turned to the bench. I believe this video is real. My father loved my grandmother more than anyone. He wouldn't have left her like this. Dorothy didn't smile, but her fingers curled slightly, just once, against her skirt. A gesture smaller than pride, bigger than relief. When the hearing recessed, Dorothy stepped outside into the marble foyer. It was cooler than she expected. Roy caught up to her. You all right? I've never been more myself, she said. From behind them, Melinda stormed past, talking into her phone, voice tight, desperate, clipped. Tell the clerk it was edited. We'll say he was coerced, or mentally unsound. Yes, go with that. I don't care what you have to do. Dorothy turned slowly, eyes tracking Melinda's retreating back. Then she looked forward again. Roy, she said softly. Yes? Print that transcript. I want her words in ink. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The bell above the pawn shop door jingled with a sound far too cheerful for the air inside. It smelled faintly of metal polish and must, like memory turned over for cash. Dorothy Langston stepped inside, heels soft against the worn linoleum, her eyes scanning the glass cases without hurry. She knew what she was looking for. Behind the counter, a teenage clerk glanced up from a comic book. Can I help you, ma'am? Dorothy nodded once. I'm looking for pearl earrings, antique, gold clasp, hand-strung, likely appraised as low value because the clasp is worn. The boy blinked. Yeah, we got some pearls in the back cabinet. He ducked beneath the glass, then resurfaced with a small velvet tray. There they were, the same pearls Wayne had given her on their 35th anniversary. The clasp had a scratch across the hinge. Callie used to play with it when she was small, pretending it was a treasure key. Dorothy leaned in, examining them without touching. You selling? The boy asked. I'm buying, she said. Those are mine. 15 minutes later, she walked out with the earrings in a paper bag and her chin a degree higher than before. She didn't call the police. She didn't argue. Instead, she drove straight to Roy's office and handed him the bag. Hold these, she said. Add them to the inventory file. Roy peeked inside, raised his brows. Didn't you wear these to Callie's christening? They've been through more baptisms than that. He opened his drawer, placed them in a fireproof lockbox, and slid it shut. That afternoon, Callie showed up at Dorothy's porch. No makeup, no heels, no excuse. Dorothy didn't ask why. Callie sat on the swing, head low, fingers fidgeting in her lap. Her voice, when it came, was wet around the edges. I knew she could be cruel, she said. But I didn't know it was this deep. I should have said something when she mocked you. When she took things. Dorothy let the silence sit between them, like a judge waiting for an honest answer. I'm sorry, Callie whispered, the words cracking. I was a coward. Dorothy reached over, covered her hand. So was I, for too long. Callie broke then, shoulders shaking, eyes red. I thought being neutral made me fair, but I think it just made me easy. Dorothy nodded slowly. It's not too late to be different. I want to help. You can, Dorothy said. But I need to say this plainly. What I forgive, I don't forget. And I won't make room for betrayal again. Even if it's soft-spoken and tear-streaked. Callie looked up. I understand. Dorothy squeezed her hand. Then we begin from here. That evening, the sun slung low over Savannah, gold slats across the living room floor, when the knock came. Dorothy opened the door and found Melinda standing there in 4-inch heels and a fury disguised as poise. Dot, she said, through clenched teeth. We need to talk. Dorothy stepped aside. We're in the parlor, same spot you sold my china from. Melinda entered without comment, clutching a leather tote too large for her frame. You've made your point, she began. With the court stunt. The video, the theatrics. I haven't made anything yet, Dorothy said, motioning toward the television. Roy, seated in the corner chair, like courtroom furniture, clicked the remote. Wayne's voice filled the space again. Calm, resolute, unflinching. Melinda's jaw tensed as the words hit. Everything I have, my trust, my accounts, the house goes to Dorothy and Callie. No one else, she spun. This isn't about grief anymore. This is revenge. Dorothy's eyes stayed level. No, it's recovery. I want you to stop the filings. Dorothy rose slowly, walked to the TV, and turned up the volume. Melinda's voice, from the funeral. She's sitting on a gold mine and a bunch of chipped teacups. Her face paled. Roy shut off the screen. Dorothy didn't speak. She just opened a folder on the table and removed a single sheet. Wayne's signature. Notarized. Dated. Melinda stared at it like it burned. Then she turned, stormed out without another word. That night, Dorothy sat in her kitchen, polishing her teacup collection, what remained of it, with a soft cloth and quiet hands. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, her earrings sat in the lockbox, and her granddaughter had texted again. Thank you for not giving up on me. Dorothy typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things she'd let her actions say first. Roy's voice was flatter than usual when he called. You may want to sit down. Dorothy didn't. She adjusted her glasses, moved the phone from her shoulder to her ear, and reached for a pen. She opened a line of credit 3 years ago, Roy said. Using your name. Paid the minimums long enough to keep the statements quiet. Dorothy's voice was calm.
How much?
$52,000. Used the house as collateral. There was a long pause. Not from shock. From restraint. She's leveraged everything, Roy added. And she didn't stop there. Dorothy glanced out the window. Her roses were blooming. Unbothered. Send me the paperwork, she said. We're fixing this today. Evie arrived 20 minutes later in a sweatshirt that read, Elder, not invisible. She rolled into the kitchen with a manila envelope balanced on her lap and a thumb drive between her teeth. I've got your original deed from the county microfiche, she said. spitting the drive into her palm. Scanned, dated, certified. And I've got a notarized letter from your closing agent. 1978. It's all there. Dorothy opened the envelope like a woman opening a safe. You kept it all this time? She asked. I keep everything. I'm a hoarder of proof. Dorothy looked at her. I could have used you sooner. Evie shrugged. You weren't ready. By afternoon, Roy had filed the correction with the clerk's office. The fraud report. The revocation of power of attorney. A new copy of the deed, backed by title insurance and the original escrow records. Melinda's name no longer appeared in any controlling position. Not on the house. Not on Dorothy's legal affairs. Not on a single binding document. The judge reviewed it in chambers and signed it without delay. Outside the courthouse, Dorothy and Roy sat on a bench in the heat. She'll appeal, Roy said. She'll lose, Dorothy replied. She always overplays her hand. Roy glanced over at her. It's official. You own everything she pretended was hers. Dorothy adjusted the strap on her purse. I never stopped owning it. She just made enough noise to make people forget. That evening, Callie arrived with 2 iced teas and a notebook full of apartment listings. I can't stay in that house, she said, without prompting. Even the air feels like it belongs to her lies. Dorothy nodded. Then let's find something you can breathe in. They sat on the porch with the listings spread between them. A second-floor walk-up near Forsyth Park. A studio behind a coffee shop. One with too much carpet. One with a tiny balcony. All possibilities. All freedom. Callie circled 3 options. I don't know what I'm doing. You're starting, Dorothy said. That's enough. Later, Dorothy pulled down the heavy deed book from her hallway shelf. She flipped past yellowed mortgage receipts and folded warranties until she found the newest page, today's date, Roy's notarized stamp, the judge's final signature. She ran a single fingertip along the ink, tracing her own name in the space where Melinda's had once been written in fraud. A quiet knock broke the silence. Dorothy opened the door and found a courier standing on the steps with a thin envelope and a clipboard. She signed for it, opened it right there under the porch light. Inside, a letter from Melinda's attorney. A formal request to negotiate out of court. To preserve dignity on all sides. Dorothy didn't laugh. She didn't frown. She simply folded the letter in half, walked to her desk, and slid it under a paperweight shaped like a gavel. The next morning, she mailed her reply. It was 1 sentence long. My dignity was never for sale. The headline stretched bold across the Sunday edition of the Savannah Tribune, just beneath the masthead, and a photo of Dorothy Langston standing in front of her yellow bungalow, pearls on, gaze sharp. Local widow reclaims home from family fraud. Dorothy didn't smile when she saw it. She just folded the paper neatly, tucked it under her arm, and went to brew her coffee like she did every morning. But by noon, 3 neighbors had stopped by. 2 with casseroles, 1 with banana bread and tears in her eyes. I always wondered, the third woman whispered, setting down a Pyrex dish. She acted like it was hers. But I never believed it. Not really. Dorothy thanked her with a nod and a soft hand on the woman's wrist. I'm still here, she said. That's all the believing I need. That afternoon, Evie wheeled up the walkway with a tote bag overflowing with mail. You've got more support than a beauty queen and a first responder combined, she said, fishing out envelopes. Cards, emails, letters to the editor. You want me to read them, or you want the joy yourself? Dorothy pulled 2 chairs into the shade. Out loud, she said. I want to hear what they sound like now. Evie grinned and began. To Miss Langston, thank you for reminding us what grace under fire looks like. Oh, this one's from a retired judge in Glynn County. Dorothy sipped her iced tea. Another envelope. Your dignity is a light. I wish my mother had fought for herself like you did. Thank you for giving us an ending that felt like justice. Evie wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I'll tell you what, if you ever run for mayor, I'll be your campaign scooter. Dorothy chuckled. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm still folding laundry like everyone else. Evie held up a card in the shape of a gavel. Even the Girl Scouts wrote you. Elsewhere in town, Melinda was pacing barefoot on her tile kitchen floor, her phone clenched like a weapon. I want that article pulled, she snapped to the editor's voicemail. You've exposed my family to libel. Slander. We're exploring legal action. The next day, the Tribune ran a short editorial response beneath the letters section. We stand by our story. All quotes cited were recorded and verified in open court. Editor-in-chief, Michael D. Glover, Roy delivered a second copy of the paper in a manila envelope, along with laminated clippings from other publications. Coastal Woman, the Beacon Herald, and even a short mention on the evening news. You're going viral, he said, setting them down on her dining table. Dorothy pulled out her old scrapbook, the one where Wayne's kindergarten drawings shared space with funeral programs and postcards from decades past. She affixed the headline with precision. Date top right. Trimmed edges. Neat glue line. History's only worth something when it's recorded, she said. Roy nodded, watching her hands work. You've recorded it in ink. And in people. That night, Dorothy sat with Callie on the porch, stars blinking over the savanna trees, fireflies dotting the yard like soft punctuation. Callie pointed at the newspaper folded on the armrest. They called you a widow, not a victim. Dorothy followed her gaze. Because that's what I am. Callie turned toward her. You think she's done coming? No, Dorothy said. I think she's just realizing the doors she used to walk through are locked from the inside now. Callie leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Dorothy didn't say another word, but she reached down, flipped the paper over, and began sketching her initials on the back page, firm, steady loops of a woman signing her own ending. Or maybe her next beginning. Because stories like hers don't close. They echo. And somewhere, a printer word out tomorrow's front page. Another headline in the making. The envelope arrived on a Monday, heavy with implication. Callie found it first, stuck in the screen door like a forgotten threat. The letterhead read, Notice of Foreclosure. Final default. Inside, the language was cold and surgical, non-payment. Accrued interest. Immediate proceedings. Melinda barely looked up from her laptop when Callie laid the envelope on the kitchen table. That's not for you, she said. Callie didn't answer. 2 hours later, she knocked on Dorothy's door. No ceremony. Just 3 soft knocks, then a pause. Dorothy opened it with a dish towel over one shoulder, her reading glasses still on. Callie's voice was careful. It's happening. They're taking the house. Dorothy didn't flinch. I know. Callie's lips trembled, but she straightened her spine. I can't stay with her. Dorothy held up a hand. 1 room, 1 key. 1 line, we move forward. We don't relive what you didn't do. Callie nodded. Understood. Dorothy stepped aside, then come in. At the courthouse that Wednesday, Roy sat in a folding chair at the back of courtroom C, a quiet presence among the clicks of briefcases and whispers of attorneys. Melinda didn't show. Her lawyer did, a junior associate in patent leather heels, who looked visibly annoyed to be there. The judge didn't waste time. Property at 18 Laurel Hollow is hereby certified for auction. Date set, 3 weeks from today. Public. Final, no stay requested. Roy scribbled the date, circled it twice. He passed Dorothy the update via text. Her response came instantly. Let her see the crowd. Back on Magnolia Street, Evie posted the auction date to the neighborhood group chat. Langston Place goes to the block August 10th. Popcorn optional, decency not required. The reactions came fast. Heart emojis, clapping gifs, even a Bible verse from Miss Carmichael at the corner. May justice roll down like waters, she wrote, and flood the wicked's patio furniture. Evie rolled her scooter to Dorothy's porch later that afternoon, holding her phone like a trophy. Never seen so many Baptists type that fast. Dorothy looked up from the gardening gloves she was folding. Let them come. Let them all come. Meanwhile, Melinda was in a panic spiral. After learning of the scheduled auction, she stormed into City Hall, demanding a delay. They sent her to the clerk. The clerk sent her to probate. When she finally filed for a restraining order, claiming emotional terrorism from Dorothy Langston, The magistrate raised one eyebrow and flipped through the folder. Based on what I see here, he said, you should be more afraid of yourself. He denied the request. Melinda left without her paperwork. That night, Callie stood in Dorothy's guest room, unpacking a single suitcase. Dorothy leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I'll pay rent, Callie said. Whatever you think's fair. Dorothy nodded. You'll keep your things tidy. No guests after 10. You'll speak plainly, even when it's uncomfortable. Callie looked up. And you? I won't ask you to pick sides, just to choose decency. Callie opened her drawer, slid in a framed photo of her father, the one where he's teaching her to ride a bike, mouth wide in laughter. I picked it already, she whispered. Dorothy watched her for a moment, then left the room without a word. But her hand lingered on the doorframe as she passed, like sealing a pact. At 2:04 a.m., Dorothy's phone buzzed. A private number. One voicemail. She played it on speaker. Melinda's voice, hoarse and strained. You don't get to win, Dot. You're just louder right now. But I know how to wait. You'll slip. Everyone does. Dorothy deleted the message without saving it, then opened her notes app. Typed install cameras by mailbox and back fence. Then another line. Add restraining order request to Thursday's court errands. Because this wasn't spite. It was preparation. And Dorothy Langston never slipped. She planned. The sun was high and merciless the morning of the open house. Heat shimmered on the sidewalks of Laurel Hollow, giving the manicured hedges and cul-de-sac driveways a dreamlike sheen. But Dorothy Langston's heels struck the pavement with purpose. No nerves, no nostalgia, just quiet resolve. The house stood hollow now, stripped of its entitlement. There was a plastic sign in the yard, bank-owned, open viewing, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Underneath, someone had stuck a smaller hand-lettered one. Take what you need, leave what you don't. Dorothy walked in. A young real estate agent in a navy shift dress blinked in surprise. Good morning. Feel free to walk around. Most of the valuables have been cleared, but the bones are solid, hardwood throughout. Dorothy gave a polite nod and stepped inside without removing her gloves. The walls were pale again. Melinda had always insisted on high-gloss color, but the bank had whitewashed everything. Even the sunroom had been stripped of its imported tile and custom blinds. What remained were outlines, where furniture had once stood, where power had once perched smugly. Dorothy moved room by room, not like a mourner but like a mapmaker, tracing the contours of a house that had never really been a home. Her fingers brushed the edge of a windowsill. She paused at the base of the staircase, remembering how many times she'd been asked to use the side door instead. Then Melinda appeared, arms crossed, sunglasses off, rage unfiltered. You're enjoying this. Dorothy didn't flinch. Melinda stepped closer. What? Did you come to gloat? Pick out a new rug for the living room? Smirk at the dust? Dorothy looked at her for 3 seconds too long, then turned and continued down the hall. No words, no apology, no attention given. Melinda's voice followed her. Say something, damn it. You think silence makes you superior? It makes you a coward. But Dorothy was already halfway through the kitchen by then, the same place where her china had been sold off, bite by bite, in fake smiles and online listings. She stood for a moment by the breakfast nook, then kept walking. Out front, Roy leaned against his car, phone in hand. When Dorothy stepped outside, he straightened. Bids already in, he said casually. Anonymous purchase, cash offer. Banks not even bothering with a second round. Dorothy arched one brow. Anonymous, is it? He shrugged, lips twitching. Savannah's full of quiet buyers these days. She didn't reply. They both turned to see Callie crouched beside 2 cardboard boxes on the curb, their flaps half folded. Inside, years of forgotten photographs, art projects, baby shoes, and a cracked snow globe with the word Nashville still legible beneath the glitter. Callie lifted one photo, her 4th birthday, Wayne holding her with icing on his cheek, and cradled it like something breakable. She tossed all of it, she said softly. Didn't even try to pack them. Dorothy stepped forward and laid one hand on her shoulder. Then we take what still matters. The rest was never real to her. By late afternoon, Evie pulled her scooter onto the curb with a half-dozen garbage bags bundled behind her like a parade float. "You sure you want to donate this?" she asked, holding up one of Melinda's designer dresses. Dorothy nodded. "Let someone else wear the lies. Maybe they'll fit differently." Evie raised a brow. "Damn, Dot, that's cold-blooded." Dorothy offered the faintest smile. "It's just laundry someone else will wash now." They loaded the rest into the van from Helping Hands Outreach. The volunteer didn't ask questions, just took the bags and handed Dorothy a receipt. She didn't need it. She wasn't claiming any of it as hers. That evening, Dorothy sat on her porch with Callie beside her, the box of saved photographs between them. One photo fluttered in the breeze. Callie reached to catch it, but missed. Dorothy leaned down, caught it just before it hit the ground. It was the last Christmas they'd all spent together. Callie looked at her. "Do you think she's done?" Dorothy shook her head slowly. "She's never done, but this house is." She looked down the street, where the sold sign had gone up faster than expected. Then back to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to dip, burnt orange, wide and waiting. Because Dorothy knew, the house was gone. But the reckoning wasn't over. Not yet. The news came in a quiet envelope, delivered by Roy over iced tea on Dorothy's porch. No fanfare, no headline, just a simple folded printout with a county seal in the corner. Dorothy opened it slowly, her thumb tracing the embossed edge of the deed transfer. "Buyer listed as Willow Harbor Transitional Housing Initiative," Roy said. "Local nonprofit, focused on women and children coming out of domestic displacement." Dorothy said nothing. He added, almost offhand, "They had just enough for an offer, but someone anonymously donated the down payment last week." In memory of Wayne Langston, Dorothy folded the deed back into the envelope and set it on the table beside her tea. "He always hated empty houses," she said. Roy leaned back in his chair. "It's poetic, Dot. She weaponized that house, and now it's going to shelter people who never had one." Dorothy's smile didn't reach her eyes, but it did soften the hard line of her jaw. Let them fill it with laughter. Let the walls finally learn kindness. The eviction notice hit Melinda 2 days later. Stamped, signed, final. She stood on the front step of what used to be her sanctuary, robe untied, mascara smudged, holding the paper like it was written in fire. Callie watched from her car across the street, not with pity, not with triumph, just finality. Melinda didn't scream, not this time. She simply sat down on the stoop, heels still on, and read the page 3 times before folding it like it might somehow disappear if handled gently enough. It didn't. That afternoon, Dorothy received a knock on the door. A young woman with short hair and a clipboard stood on the porch with a bouquet of yellow tulips wrapped in butcher paper. "These are from the Willow Harbor team," she said. "They asked me to deliver them personally." Dorothy blinked at the card tucked into the ribbon. "Thank you for giving us a home. In honor of your husband and your courage." Dorothy placed the flowers in a chipped vase from her wedding registry and set them in the center of the table. She didn't cry, but she did touch the petals, like they were soft chapters of something reborn. Callie moved into her new apartment on the following Saturday. A 3rd-floor walk-up with squeaky stairs, peeling paint, and a view of the back alley. But it was hers. The lease had her name. The spare key was hers to lose, and Dorothy had helped her hang every picture frame. "It's not much," Callie said, tugging the old couch cover into place. Dorothy looked around. "It's more than you've had in years." Callie paused. "You think I'll be all right?" "You'll be better than that," Dorothy replied. "You'll be free." Callie smiled through the nerves. "Thanks for co-signing." Dorothy gave her a look. "You don't need rescuing. You need remembering." Callie tilted her head. "Of what?" Dorothy walked to the small kitchen, opened a drawer, and placed inside a photo, Callie on Wayne's shoulders, both of them mid-laugh. "Of who you come from." The next morning, Evie wheeled into the newly renamed Langston House Shelter with a Tupperware tower of chocolate chip cookies and a crocheted welcome mat that read, "You belong here." One of the staffers blinked in delight. "You're friends with the donor?" Evie grinned. "More like friends with the wrecking ball that made room for this place." They placed the cookies in the common room, beneath a framed dedication plaque that read, This home stands because someone stood first, in memory of Wayne Langston and all who fight quietly. That evening, Dorothy sat alone at her writing desk, the smell of tulips faint in the air, the sun low behind her windows. She opened a new page in her scrapbook, carefully taping in the shelter's flyer. Then she opened her journal and wrote 3 words, "House made whole." She paused, then added one more line, deliberate and small, next her name. Because the property was gone, but the debts weren't, and Melinda's signature was still on more than one thing. Dorothy closed the journal with a soft snap. The reckoning wasn't done. It was evolving. The envelope was cream-colored and sealed with wax. Callie had carried it in her purse for weeks, folded and refolded, the edges soft from waiting. It had been her father's handwriting that made her hesitate. Not out of fear, out of reverence. But that evening, something in her settled. She sat cross-legged on Dorothy's floor, shoes off, tea cooling untouched beside her, and finally slid her finger beneath the seal. Inside was one page. No signature flourish, no legal jargon, just Wayne's words, written in the same blocky penmanship she remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists. "My girl, if you're reading this, you're older than I ever planned to miss. That breaks me. But if I can give you anything from where I am, it's this: stay soft, not weak, soft. Don't let this world turn you into someone who has to win at every table. Be kind when it's hardest. Tell the truth when it costs you. And if you ever forget who you are, ask your grandmother. She remembers better than anyone. I loved you the moment I saw you. I love you still." Callie didn't cry right away. She placed the letter down on Dorothy's lap, like it might shatter, then lowered her head and let the years pour out, salted, silent, shaking. Dorothy stroked her hair with one hand and kept the other on the page. Her thumb rested over the word still. When the tears slowed, Dorothy rose, walked to the hallway closet, and returned with a jewelry box. Small, square, velvet worn at the corners. She opened it and turned it toward Callie. Inside was a gold locket, delicate and oval, etched with the initials WL in careful script. Dorothy popped it open with her thumbnail to reveal a photo no larger than a coin. Wayne holding infant Callie, both of them bathed in afternoon light. "I wore it the week he left," Dorothy said softly. "Then I tucked it away. For this moment," Callie's fingers hovered over the locket. "It's beautiful." Dorothy clipped it gently around her neck. "It's yours. Not because you earned it, but because you remembered who he was." Callie closed her eyes. "I miss him. I know." The next day, Roy stopped by with an updated trust document in a leather-bound folder. "I made it official," he said, flipping to the signature page. "You're now the primary beneficiary. Dot wanted it clear. The line goes forward through you, not around you." Callie stared at the page. "But I don't have anything figured out yet." Dorothy placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's how legacy works. We pass it before you're ready." Roy added, "There's a clause for charitable disbursements, if you ever feel like paying something forward." Callie nodded slowly. "I will." Later that evening, Evie rolled up with a mason jar full of peach tea and no preamble. "She's different now," she said, motioning toward the porch, where Callie was hanging wind chimes. "It skipped a generation, but she got it." Dorothy looked up from her needlework. "She did." Evie took a sip. "You writing her a letter?" Dorothy didn't answer. But that night, after the porch light flicked off and the house went still, she sat at her desk with a clean sheet of paper and her best pen. She didn't use stationery. Just the plain stuff, honest and unpretentious, like truth should be. She wrote slowly. "To Callie when I am no longer here." She paused, then began again. "I don't expect you to become me. I expect you to surpass me. With tenderness, with steel. With grace I didn't always show but always believed in. You come from people who stood through storms without shouting, who lost with dignity and loved without contracts. Let that guide you when no one else does. If ever someone tries to shrink you, remember I gave you my name. I gave you my fight. And the locket holds more than his photo. It holds your beginning. She signed it simply, Love. Then she folded it, slid it into a stamped envelope, and placed it beneath the tray in her desk drawer, next to her will, her titles, and the last copy of the shelter flyer. There it would wait. Not for grief, but for inheritance of a different kind. The courtroom was colder than usual. The air conditioning rattled faintly overhead, humming like a machine too tired to stop. Dorothy Langston sat in the front row, gloved hands folded over her handbag, spine straight. She wore no jewelry today, except the gold locket around Callie's neck, visible 2 seats down. Roy stood at the petitioner's table, calm as stone, his brief open like scripture. Callie sat behind him, her lips pressed together, watching everything, learning. The judge, a woman this time, Merrill Hastings, adjusted her glasses and looked at the stack of folders before her. We are gathered for final disposition of the Wayne Langston estate, pursuant to prior filings and verified testamentary exhibits. Counsel, you may proceed. Roy rose. Your Honor, all relevant evidence has been submitted. Video will, supplemental trust documents, proof of revocation of fraudulent powers of attorney. We request closure of the estate and formal assignment of successor trustee rights to Miss Callie Langston. The judge nodded. Noted. From the gallery, Melinda cleared her throat. She stood dramatically, without being asked. Your Honor, she said, tone polished, eyes watery. I wasn't prepared to speak, but I believe the court deserves to hear from someone who actually lived in Wayne's household, who saw his intentions play out daily. The judge didn't interrupt. I made mistakes, Melinda continued, hand fluttering to her chest. But I also held that family together after Wayne passed. I cleaned, I cared. Roy didn't look up. Dorothy didn't blink. Callie, however, stood. Your Honor, she said, voice clear. That's not true. The judge raised a hand gently. Miss Langston, please wait your turn. Melinda's eyes gleamed. I just want to be heard. The judge leaned forward. You were heard in 3 prior hearings. Your claims were examined and denied. Your filings were incomplete. Your name appears nowhere on the verified deed, trust, or final will. And based on the evidence presented, including your own words recorded at the memorial, this court finds your assertions not only invalid, but in parts willfully deceptive. Melinda sat down as if yanked from a wire. Judge Hastings turned to Roy. Motion to close the estate is approved. The court formally appoints Miss Callie Langston as successor trustee. She stamped the papers herself. The sound echoed like a final drumbeat. Outside, the sun was brutal and bright, Savannah in full summer breath. Roy held the courthouse door open for both Langston women. That's it, he said. No more hearings. No more contests. It's all yours now. Callie exhaled like she'd been underwater for years. Dorothy touched her shoulder. Not yours, she said softly. Ours. They stepped into the sunlight. Melinda stood at the edge of the lot, arms folded, eyes wide with disbelief. For once, she didn't speak. Dorothy didn't either. She walked past her like a marble statue, unmoved, unshakable. That evening, Evie set a tray on Dorothy's table. 3 champagne flutes, 1 bottle chilled to the neck, and a single chocolate cupcake split 3 ways. You're not going to believe this, she said, pulling out her phone. The Tribune just ran a blurb about the court's final ruling. They called you a Southern steel magnolia with courtroom poise and porch-light grace. Roy laughed. Did you write that? I wish I had. Dorothy poured the champagne and passed each glass. To justice, Roy said. To beginnings, Callie added. Dorothy lifted hers last. To endings done right. They clinked gently, nothing dramatic, just the quiet chime of people who'd waited a long time to stop bracing for impact. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the porch lights turned on, Dorothy sat with a box on her lap, a plain banker's box filled with signed documents, letters, receipts, and her stamped court motion. At the very bottom, she placed the deed. Then she taped the box shut and wrote in neat marker on the lid, Langston, closed. She didn't shelve it in the attic. She didn't burn it. She set it in the hallway closet beside the emergency flashlight and the umbrella stand, accessible but behind her. Because it wasn't about forgetting, it was about finishing, and the reckoning was no longer storming. It was settling into place. The wedding dress had lived in Dorothy's cedar chest for over 50 years. Ivory silk, yellowing at the hem, with seed pearl detailing that caught the light like memory. It hadn't seen daylight since the Reagan administration. But one afternoon, as cicadas sang and the attic fan hummed overhead, Dorothy opened the chest with both hands and stared at the gown like it had once said something important. She didn't sigh. She didn't mourn. She measured. By sunset, her sewing machine was humming softly by the dining room window. She cut a long strip of satin from the train, steady hands, even stitches. The fabric still held the scent of lavender and thyme. Callie watched from the doorway. "You sure?" Dorothy looked up. "It's not a dress anymore. It's legacy, and you're walking in it." Graduation day bloomed hot and bright, Savannah in her finest humid glory. The college lawn was covered in folding chairs, and proud families fanning themselves with programs. Rows of black caps dotted the field like ripe seeds about to scatter. Callie stood in her row, robe zipped, mortarboard slightly crooked, the cream sash gleaming across her chest. If you looked closely, you could see the faint stitching where the veil had once been joined. Dorothy sat dead center in the third row, Evie on one side, Roy on the other. She wore a tailored summer suit, her pearls glinting at the collar, and when Callie's name was called, Callie Renee Langston, Dorothy didn't just clap, she stood. She clapped like every courtroom battle, every sleepless night, every letter and envelope and notarized form had been building toward this single moment of applause. Evie wiped her eyes with a floral handkerchief. "Told you she'd rise," she whispered. Roy chuckled and lifted his phone. "Hold still," he said. 3 generations forward. Click. Dorothy didn't even look at the camera. She was too busy watching Callie beam, sunlight on her cheeks, gown flowing, eyes clear as glass. The ceremony ended with polite music and a recession line of students and families. But when Callie took the podium for her turn as student speaker, the lawn hushed. "My name is Callie Langston," she began, voice firm, mic low. "I am the daughter of a man who taught me integrity. I am the granddaughter of a woman who taught me how to use it." A murmur of recognition rippled through the crowd. "My grandmother didn't just give me shelter when I had nowhere to go. She gave me spine when mine was soft." She didn't lecture. She didn't scold. She just showed up every day with her dignity intact and made space for me to find mine. Dorothy blinked twice. Callie went on, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "Some of us come to this stage with a long line behind us. Some of us have to build that line ourselves. I was lucky. I inherited mine, brick by brick, from a woman who refused to leave herself behind." The crowd clapped. Some stood. Evie clapped with her whole arm. "If she says one more word, I'll need waterproof mascara and bourbon." Dorothy smiled. A full smile. A teeth smile. Later, back at the bungalow, Roy lit the grill, while Evie handed out lemonade, and Dorothy hung the pressed graduation sash on a hook in the hallway. Callie stood in the kitchen, holding her framed diploma. "I want to frame the sash too," she said. "Not hide it." Dorothy looked over. "Good. Women in this family don't hide their work." Callie stepped closer. "You proud?" Dorothy touched the locket at her throat. "I've never been prouder." They stood like that for a moment, shadows overlapping on the tile floor, generations stacked like chapters. Then a knock came at the door. Dorothy opened it slowly. A certified letter. No return address. She took it gently, fingers unreadable, because there was still one thing Melinda hadn't signed over, and Dorothy had a name to reclaim, on paper, in court, and finally in peace. The reckoning wasn't roaring anymore, but it wasn't gone. The front door of 18 Laurel Hollow had once been slammed in anger, locked with fear, and painted over in pretense. But today it stood open wide, sunlight spilling across the threshold, like a clean beginning. The living room smelled of lemon oil and cinnamon bread. Fold-out chairs lined the walls. A table near the fireplace held a tray of dollar store punch and homemade cookies. On the far side of the room, someone had hung a hand-painted sign, "Willow Harbor Community Pantry. Take what you need, give what you can." Dorothy stepped inside with Callie on her arm. Her heels were polished. Her pearls glinted in the light. She wore the same summer suit she'd worn to the final hearing, pressed, sharp, unbothered. Volunteers buzzed around them, restocking shelves, arranging canned goods into towers of dignity. A little boy reached for peanut butter and paused to whisper, "Thank you," without knowing who she was. But Dorothy smiled. Just the same. Evie rolled up beside them, balancing a tray of sliced pound cake. "I made extras," she said. "Figured it's hard to get seconds when you're shy." Callie grinned. "You're building a whole new economy. Sugar and justice." Dorothy's eyes traveled across the space, the same one where Melinda had once sat perched on designer cushions, judging everyone who passed. Now it held kindness in plastic bins and banana boxes. Hope disguised as groceries. She stepped to the center of the room. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "We don't always get to choose our family," she said, "but we can choose who eats." The room stilled, just for a moment, and then it clapped gently, at first, then fuller, like acknowledgement rather than applause. Back at the punch table, Callie pulled a folded envelope from her purse. "I was going to wait," she said, but she handed it to Dorothy. Inside an acceptance letter, Master's in Social Work, Georgia State. Full scholarship. Dorothy looked up, blinking slowly. "They know what they're getting?" Callie laughed. "They'll find out." Roy walked over, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "She's going to change policy, or torch it politely." Callie raised her glass. "To rebuilding." But Dorothy had something else in her purse. A slim envelope, hand-labeled. Inside a deed. 1/3 acre on the edge of Liberty County. Nothing built, nothing claimed. "For your next chapter," Dorothy said. "Whatever it looks like." Callie stared at the paper. "You're giving me land?" Dorothy nodded. "Better than shoes. They don't fit forever." Evie sniffed. "If you two get any more sentimental, I'm starting a side hustle selling tissues." Roy placed a hand on Callie's shoulder. "You know she didn't just give you a legacy, right?" Callie looked at him, blinking. "She gave you justice," he said. "Most people don't get both." Callie looked back at her grandmother. "I'll make it count." Dorothy shrugged gently. "You already are." Outside, the air was soft and gold-lit. Wind rolled over the lawn, sending the community garden beds fluttering with seed packet labels and hand-drawn signs from local school kids. Dorothy stood at the edge of the lot, watching as families wandered the pantry aisles that used to be Melinda's living room. Someone was playing music from a Bluetooth speaker. The sound was cheap, crackling, and perfect. A woman tapped her on the shoulder. "You're Miss Langston, right?" Dorothy nodded. "Thank you," the woman said. "My daughter and I. This place means we don't have to choose between rent and dinner." Dorothy smiled, then turned back to the house and stared at it, not as a memory, not even as a victory, just as something transformed. Callie came up beside her. "Do you ever think about that first day? The wedding?" Dorothy's eyes narrowed just slightly. "They took my teeth." Callie nodded slowly, lips pressed in quiet respect. Dorothy tilted her head. "I gave them nothing to bite with." Then she glanced toward the house. "And everything to remember."